Welcome to NewsNation's Backscroll, where we look back at our major news coverage on the most important topics and personalities of our time.
I disagree with all of you.
You don't even know what we said.
Yeah, I've been watching Cuomo, and unlike you, I can absorb information. This has nothing to do with the midterms, zero. And the reason is so many things are going to happen between now and this time next year. And it's going to be a completely different country than it is now. Now, I can't predict which way that's going to go.
Then how do you know it's going to be a completely different country?
Because there are so many things that have to be decided. There are too many undecideds. And you can start with the Supreme Court ruling on the tariffs. You can start on that. And they'll rule in Donald Trump's favor because of the 1974 law that Gerald Ford signed into. And they have to. The Supreme Court can't change the law. It has to uphold what's already been in precedent. Now, they'll rein Trump in a little bit, but that will give Trump then a free field to see if in the next 8 months the tariffs can kick in to bring prices down and to help people. That's what the midterms are all about. It's about economics here. It's not about China. It's not even about Putin. It's about that. In Virginia, you can't read much into it because the Republican candidate, with all due respect, because I do respect her for running, was terrible. And the Democrats are much more motivated in the northern part of the Commonwealth because they hate Trump so much. And the MAGA people in the rural areas, they weren't, you're going to see that the turnout in Virginia was so-so. But the candidate now has to have sizzle, has to have pop. We've changed. Calvin Coolidge could never get elected.
Cool cow.
Okay? You've got to have some charisma. That's what Mamdani's running on. Just that he, you know, if you watch the Saturday Night Live parody on him, they nailed him because he's walking in, I'm this, I'm that. He's got high energy, smiling all the time. And that means a lot to people who don't know a lot. And unfortunately, the Republican in Virginia was flat and never, ever caught fire. So I predicted that, one of the few I did predict. But if people think that tonight is going to give any indication about 11 months, 12 months from now, they're misguided, Cuomo.
Okay. I'll take your take on it. Let me put it to the table, and you can hear the reactions. Chris Stirewalt. Look, I would argue that on Bill's theory, Mamdani is the answer to Trump for angry people on the left. He is a guy who is seen as unconventional, super charismatic in a way that puts some people off, that some people resonate, hated by the system, wants to disrupt the system, and seems to be the enemy of the enemy. That's why I believe he didn't start the movement, nor did Trump. But he may become the mascot of it.
Well, the great thing about angry populism is it continues to break a system that frustrates people, which causes people to be more frustrated, which causes them to be more susceptible to the blandishments of angry populism. So it's a self-licking ice cream cone because nothing ever gets better, and the worse it gets, the more people are susceptible to demagoguery and all of that stuff. But I will say this, 8 years ago, Ed Gillespie, former chairman of the Republican National Committee, Easy Ed, a good candidate, well-funded, all of that stuff. He got 45% of the vote in Virginia, running for governor. Winsome Earl Sears is getting what? 45% of the vote in Virginia. This is it. This is Virginia says, and they said it last year, or they said it 4 years ago, they vote against the party in power. They typically vote for change. We should remember, though, that 4 years ago, Glenn Youngkin's victory was an upset. Terry McAuliffe was the favored guy. He had led narrowly in the polls, and Youngkin delivered an upset in a state that has gotten increasingly Democratic. But I don't think Winsome Earl Sears is doing a bad job. She's just getting the share of the vote that a Republican was going to probably get in Virginia no matter what.
All right, it is 10 p.m. on the East Coast of the United States. What hour we have the close in California. And in Washington State, California, the last big race really that we're waiting for as we continue with our coverage. It's great to be with you. Special NewsNation coverage of the night. I am Connell McShane, moving into the big chair now from the wall. I'll go back
They
to the
finally
wall.
let you sit down.
Yeah.
Look who it is in from Chicago.
I'm Nicole Burley, in from Chicago, here with NewsNation political editor Chris Steyerwalt. Good to see you in person, which I love. We will bring you more on all the races in a moment. We do want to bring you up to speed on the big races. Decision Desk HQ has already called. So we start right here in New York City. Decision Desk HQ projects Zoran Mamdani will be the next mayor of the nation's largest city. He's expected to speak in about 15 minutes. In New Jersey, Decision Desk HQ projecting Mikey Sherrill will win the governor's mansion. And in Virginia, Decision Desk HQ projecting Abigail Spanberger will win the gubernatorial race. Here is her message to voters tonight.
And to those Virginians who did not vote for me, I want you to know that my goal and my intent is to serve all Virginians.
And staying in Virginia, DDHQ also projecting the Democrat, Ghazal Hashim, is winning the lieutenant governor's race. We were looking at these races, how they track one to the other, governor's race, lieutenant governor's race. And, of course, the race for attorney general was closely watched in the state of Virginia. The projected winner there, Jay Jones winning in Virginia. You know, that's one of the big stories. We're going to head over to the wall right now and give you a look at some of these numbers in the races statewide. Certainly we'll get to Virginia. We have New Jersey up right now. We called New Jersey. We were first to the call on all of these races for Mikey Sherrill. So Mikey Sherrill, the Democrat, keeps New Jersey blue. Jack Ciattarelli, the Republican, running for the third time, unable to do it. And in fact, if you look back historically at how this state had gone, Sherrill's been running ahead in many key counties of Kamala Harris in the last presidential race, and Ciattarelli has been running behind himself, 48% statewide, 43 is where he's tracking. We'll have time as we continue throughout our coverage to go into some of the details, but, you know, in and around Newark, New Jersey has been one of the key places that we've been watching in Essex County. We had a conversation earlier in the night about some of these, as they refer to them, majority-minority counties. So if you look at the census data, for example, in Essex County, 40% of the vote is black voters there. Hispanic voters make up 26%. Both are higher than the state average. And in those particular counties like that, we saw this all over the state. The performance from Sherrill was better than Harris, 77 versus 72, and the performance from Ciattarelli in many cases was worse than Ciattarelli when he ran 4 years ago. So that's really what happened in the state of New Jersey. I'll give you a quick look at Virginia. I think what Virginia, and you know, Chris can weigh in on this as we look at this in some more detail later on, Abigail Spanberger winning over Winsome Earl Sears, is, you know, remember when we covered the presidential race last time? We talked about all those counties that were becoming either less blue or more red. In Virginia, county after county turning more blue. In fact, at last check, there were only 4 counties in the entire state of Virginia that hadn't moved in some way to the blue side, become, you know, less red or more blue. You look at Loudoun County as an example of what's been going on statewide in Virginia. Again, in a historical comparison, there's Loudoun up next to Arlington on the map. Kamala Harris, it was at 57. Spanberger's running ahead of her at 64%, and Winsome Earl Sears underperforming the numbers that Donald Trump put up there. So New Jersey and Virginia, those were the big governor's races that were on the board tonight. And then the other race that, of course, is getting a lot of attention around the entire country was the race for mayor here in New York City. And Zoran Mamdani, the 34-year-old self-identified Democratic socialist, will be the next mayor in this city, the largest city of the country. Right now, with 84% of the vote in New York, Mamdani is tracking above the key mark of 50%. There were some questions going in about whether he would get to 50. We'll see. 50.5 is where he is. One of the surprises is that Curtis Sliwa, who's the Republican nominee, underperforming some of the numbers we had in the polls. Nobody expected Sliwa to win, but the race between Sliwa and Cuomo was thought, by some analysts at least, maybe to be close as to who would come in second. It's not close. Cuomo's way ahead at 42. In fact, he's closer to Mamdani than many of the polls had.
In a night with Congressman Jim Jordan, Republican of Ohio. Good to see you, sir. Vivek Ramaswamy running for governor in Ohio. Yeah. He says affordability is the #1 issue.
No, I think it is an important issue, and where we are now compared to where we were under President Biden with the record inflation we had there, do we want it to get better? Of course, and President Trump's working on that. That's why we cut taxes. That was part of the big, beautiful bill. I think those things will have a real impact as we move, as we get a little further down the road. But compared to where we were under President Biden, certainly an improvement, certainly better off. Whether you look at the markets, whether you look at the interest rates, whatever you look at compared to where we were in the previous presidency, things are better. But I do think
are Republicans being respectful enough of how the American people feel? Joe Biden was not, objectively. Are Republicans being respectful enough that Americans still are feeling an enormous amount of pain, especially the working class Americans that put Trump and Republicans in control of the House, the Senate, and the White House?
Yes, that's why we want the government open. We didn't close the government. They did. Every Republican in the House voted to keep the government open. 14 times in 36 days, they've tried to have the Democrats in the Senate vote with the Republicans in the Senate to keep the government open. So, yes, we care about where the American people are. But I do think it's a little difficult and maybe not just accurate to compare a national election 1 year ago with a 3-state, 1 big blue city election yesterday, and somehow say that they're equivalent. They're not. The whole nation voted, red and blue states, not just 3 blue states and 1 really blue city, and extrapolate from there. So I think that's just not a false, I think that's just a false comparison.
Well, I think maybe you didn't hear the monologue, but I made that point, exactly that point.
No, that's exactly what I heard.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly what I heard. You talked about the interpretation Democrats took from the election in 24, which was a national election, every member of Congress, a third of the Senate, and the presidency, and compared that to what you said Republicans are interpreting a 3 blue state, 1 really blue city election. That's a different animal. Those are 2 different things.
No, they are, sir, but I'm hearing a lot of Republicans who are interpreting this election, especially a lot of Jewish Republicans, who are terrified of what's happened in New York City.
Well, we should be, because a socialist won the mayor's position in our largest city, a socialist who says they want government-run stores. You talk about affordability, you talk about shortages and rationing. That's what happens when you have government-run groceries, for goodness sake.
Okay, well, I think we may be talking past each other in that sense, but you're saying, I think, conflating that caring about how the government gets reopened with Americans feeling like Republicans understand the pain they are experiencing. Noteworthy that Congress still gets paid and the shutdown federal workers do not. This is Marjorie Taylor Greene today with Blake Berman on the Hill. Take a listen.
It was about America first. It was about MAHA, and it was about cost of living and putting Americans' issues above everything else. And that has not been the focus for months now.
Does she have a point?
I think Marjorie is on point in many ways. But I also think the election was about securing the border, which we've done. That was front and center in this election. I think this election was about common sense. You know, this idea that somehow the left who thinks, you know, men
talking about the
can participate
2024
in women's
election or
sports and
last
somehow
night?
That's fair. I'm talking about 2024. I'm talking about, because Marjorie's talking about what we have done this Congress. So I think we've been doing exactly what we said. Certainly the president has. The president said he was going to cut taxes. He did. He said he was going to secure the border. He did. We've all been helping with that. He said he was going to make sure men aren't competing in women's sports. He did. He said he was going to make sure Iran didn't get nuclear capability. He stopped that as well. So the president's been doing what he said. That's what we campaigned on. So I do think we're doing that. But to then say somehow yesterday impacts, I just don't get the direct comparison from what we were elected to do. Now, we are elected a focus on affordability, and I think we've done that with the things we put in the big, beautiful bill. And as I said, you're the one who talked about food stamps and affordability. The Democrats are the one who shut down the government and are jeopardizing the food stamps that you referenced.
Good morning. Hello to you both. Good morning. I normally do this with y'all at night, but bright and early past post-election day. So I think all of these things can be true. And tell me if you agree or disagree. One, it was a big night for Democrats. In politics, you either win or you lose. They won across the board. Two, Donald Trump wasn't on the ballot, will never be on the ballot again. Republicans have to figure that out going forward. Three, in a few months, no one's talking about Abigail Spanberger. No one's talking about Mikey Sherrill. Everyone's on to the election. for 2026, but we're still talking about Zoran Mamdani. Miss anything?
I think that's right. I think the big issue is what you touched on with Trump. This coalition that he was able to build with working class Americans, with Hispanic voters, with young men, with young voters. That coalition, Republicans have not been able to replicate that in past midterms when Trump's not on the ballot. And that's why I think they're rented voters.
You used that term to me once. I thought that was fascinating. What do you mean by that?
I think that they're voters that are rented by they're not owned by the Republican Party. They're rented by when Trump is on the ballot. Because oftentimes you'll have a lot of voters that will go and vote just for Trump and they'll leave. You saw that in Pennsylvania in the Senate race for Dave McCormick, for example. You had a lot of voters that would just go to the ballot box, tick Trump and leave. They wouldn't even vote down ballot. So this is a real challenge for Republicans that they're going to have to figure out. Now, on your point of whether or not this was a big night for Democrats, look, my view is these are blue states. These are Kamala Harris won states. I don't think Republicans were going into tonight not expecting victories from the Democrats there.
Call it a blue state, but it had a Republican governor in Virginia. Call it a blue state in New Jersey, but the last time the same party won the governorship 3 times in a row was in the 1960s. Yep. And so I understand the political speak of trying to downplay it, but the reality is hundreds of millions of dollars were spent in these races, major investments by the political parties. And like I said, politics is a zero-sum game. You either win or you lose. And it's not lost on me, as we talked about yesterday, when you look at the margins, Democrats grew their margins in every county in Virginia. In the purple counties we talked about yesterday, like Loudoun County, they outpaced the 2024 tally. So when you look inside the numbers, I think it is a little troubling when you talk about how can Republicans keep that Trump coalition and translate that to, in this case, the midterms. The answers aren't there for them right now, but certainly focusing on text messages and a socialist didn't get the job done.
Zoran Mamdani says Trump turned the volume up.
Yeah.
It's going up and up and up and up and up, I suspect. What do you think happens from here?
I think everyone's going to take this Mamdani and sort of say that he's being replicated across the country. Republicans have already started to do that when they have candidates. They're going to say, we're in Indianapolis, wherever we are, we have a Mamdani here who's on the ballot. So I think you'll see him used in a lot of different ways to show that the Democrats are moving in a more progressive direction. I do think it was interesting that Jay Jones ended up winning after the text messages.
Yeah.
I mean, that surprised me. I really was skeptical that he was going to be able to pull it off, but I think Spanberger really pulled him along with her margin there.
Yeah, big coattails, dragged him over the finish line. And I think the thing for Democrats are going to have to figure this out, but I think the answer here about Mamdani is there's only one political party in America where you have to be 100% loyal to one singular figure, and that's the Republican Party. The Democrats are a big tent party. We can elect an Abigail Spanberger. We can elect a Sherrill. We can elect a Mamdani. We can have everyone in our party.
Last time I checked, there's a Republican in the White House, a Republican-controlled Senate, and a Republican-controlled House.
Well, we just showed last night that we can actually win, and win in broad different ways in different spaces with different constituencies.
It's not lost upon me that we have this beautiful building behind us. Day 36 of the government shutdown. You said to me the other night, Annalise, that if there was a big Democratic win, which let's look, Democrats won all across the board. Whatever adjective you want to ascribe to it, they won. That it could sort of make them feel even more emboldened and dig in even more and say, see, this is our position, we're right, and we're winning on this. Do you still feel the same way this morning?
No, I actually feel the opposite. I think that it might shake loose something. I think there's a possibility that this could be one of the things that needs to happen before Democrats feel like they can concede and vote to reopen the government. They've, of course, voted, 14 times now against reopening the government. And so I think Democrats were a little bit worried that there was going to be, some enthusiasm lost. And they didn't want that message right before the election of we're going and asking Democrats to come out and vote and we're going to fold and not get what we want right before an election. So that was sort of an undercurrent. So I think this had to happen. The elections had to be behind them. And whether or not they're getting anything out of this, they can at least say, we had a big night. The Americans are with us. It's time to kind of get the government reopened.
What is going to be the takeaway from tonight? What's the lesson?
Well, it depends on whether you're besotted by brain-dead partisanship. If you are, and you're a hardcore Republican, then the lesson is going to be that the Democratic Party is now in the thrall of Zoran Mamdani, and they're going off a cliff, and that actually this series of stinging defeats is actually good news, is what you'll conclude if you're a hardcore MAGA Republican. If you are a Democrat, you will say, everything is better now. We're fixed. We are whole again. But allow me to suggest two winners, important winners tonight. We see Zoran Mamdani is about to come out. That he is not the creation of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but he is a representation. He is an extension of a movement that she was an early avatar of. Later, and people should stick around and continue to watch NewsNation, of course, Gavin Newsom's going to have a great evening, right? He's expected to have a great evening because Prop 50 is going to win in California. I tell you, two visions for the Democratic Party, one in California and Gavin Newsom, one in New York with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I think it is the beginning of a 2028 derby between those two. There will be many claimants for the Democratic throne.
Do you really think it's going to come down to those two?
I think they represent the beginning of the difficult, very difficult fight that is going to take place within the Democratic Party about which way they're going to go.
I also think that, you know, what Leland's talking about, for me, it was never abortion or even the idea of pro-life. I always felt that that was a very cheap way to not deal with reproductive rights. I think a lot of women are still motivated by what happened with Dobbs and how casual people were about a surrendering of the right to their own body.
Yeah, but they were more motivated. The fundamental right that all of us missed was people felt a fundamental right about their kids, about do my kids get gender identity training in third grade? Do I have a fundamental right to buy groceries that I can afford? Do I have a fundamental right for my kids, if they're accused of something, to have due process? There were all these other rights that ended up being more important in 2024. It's interesting that Abigail Spanberger won in Virginia 4 years after Youngkin, without having to say any of the school parent rights stuff that Youngkin did.
Yeah,
it shifted.
She couldn't say, I don't want boys and girls sports.
It shifted. But here's one thing we know for sure tonight as we wrap up this first part of our coverage here at NewsNation. Thank you for being with us. We are first because DDHQ is the best. And we call races early and we call them accurately. Thank you for being with us to do it, and thank you for being with me, my friends.
Lots of fun.
There we go. DDHQ, cheers to the nerds there. They continue their work. Big races. Prop 50 in California. The margins on that is going to be huge. Nobody better than Conor McShane, Nicole Burley. Chris Steyerwalt sticks around for a late evening. We'll get you a cup of coffee.
All right, let's move on to the Daily Take at 1:15. We welcome in Geraldo Rivera. This is the day after the election we were just talking about. Good to see you, my friend. I actually want to pick up on the conversation to some extent that I was just having with our elections analysts. They're great, by the way, DDHQ. Jeffrey Skelly was on with us about this whole idea about is there backlash to Trump in immigration enforcement. You've been outspoken about this, the how, what they're doing. And I just kept looking at the data all night in these counties where Trump had made inroads last year, particularly New Jersey. He was doing better in places where you had a high Latino population. And then last night, Sherrill, dominated there. She wiped out all those gains or inroads. What was your takeaway?
Well, it was an enormous, overt demonstration of how absolutely pissed off Latinos are about this grotesque immigration enforcement. Let me just, P.S., you guys did a great job last night. DDHQ and our whole panel, you are revolutionizing election coverage. You made the other guys look silly and slow, and I think I congratulate you.
What did you
Back
think
to my
of
Latinos.
What did you think of Cuomo's mustache in comparison to your own, however?
I thought Cuomo's mustache was definitely a work in progress. I have to advise him that those are the kinds of things that you need a summer vacation to grow out before you debut them in public before millions of viewers.
See, Chris, this is the expert. This is
maybe
the
he was
expert,
trying for a Latino look.
Right, well, maybe the guy with the best-known mustache on television. I just
which segues into my Latino report.
Perfect.
I believe that, to me personally, all I know is, full disclosure, all I know is how my personal circle has been responding to immigration enforcement and the delight we took in the Hispanics reversing that move to Trump, going back to their own concerns and looking to people who represent them and will take care of them on an equal basis, and not papers, please, arresting people at Home Depot, or when they're with their children at school, or when they go to their immigration hearing, they're getting arrested. It's ridiculous. It's horrible. I think that Latinos are home now. That's not to say that a Republican won't come along that can address issues that are of special concern to Latino Americans. But as of right now, I think there is a broad rejection, my sense is, a broad rejection of the president's immigration policy, and it finally had some place where it could be manifest. And it was manifest in these elections in Virginia and in New Jersey. 2/3 or more of the voters, Latino voters, came back to the Democrat. And I think that Republicans beware. There is consequence that, you can't just be tackling people and plucking them out of cars and having them, hysterically crying because the child is shoveled aside. There's been some terrible, terrible things going on. My thesis is what you saw last night was Latinos saying, basta, enough of this, Connell.
Enough, or just it went too far, may have been the message to Trump. Now, what it means going forward, again, I think that's a totally separate question. It doesn't always mean that what happened this year is going to repeat itself next year, but you went too far, or you're going too far, seems to have been the message that was sent. Now, I want to talk about Mamdani. Here's how we'll do it today. This whole idea that there's going to be an exodus from New York because this guy won and will be the next mayor of New York City. I want to see what you think of that. This is an interesting article, Realtor.com, on wealthy New Yorkers preparing for a mayoral election exodus. And it talks about how there's been a luxury bidding war in the suburbs, so in like Greenwich, Connecticut, or Paramus, New Jersey, phones ringing off the hook with real estate agents. They're calling it the Mamdani effect, a rush of people from Manhattan and Brooklyn in the city looking to move to the suburbs outside the city because of Mamdani. Full disclosure, I'm doing the opposite. I've lived in the suburbs now for many years, and in the process of selling my house. I can tell you that the offers are there right away. They are selling like crazy houses in the suburbs. But I'm coming back to the city, which is I'm really looking forward to doing.
Don't rush.
Well, no, it's already done, Geraldo. But next time I do, I'll use you as my agent. But do you believe in this Mamdani, this Mamdani effect?
Well, as a dad whose son has recently purchased a condo in the Queens, Bushwick, Brooklyn area, the borderline there, and my daughter, who's with child, as I announced inadvertently a couple of weeks ago, and her husband in the Village, downtown Manhattan. They paid an enormous premium, it seemed to me. I hope they didn't overpay in light of news events, but I have great faith in New York.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.